Okay, let's talk about Malik Nabers, Frankie. Wide receiver drafted by the New York Football Giants. He's 6 foot, 205 pounds, runs a 4.36 40. Talk to us about Malik Nabers, buddy.
Malik Nabers is one of the guys that when you know you're bringing him onto your team, he hates losing more than he likes winning. This dude brings a moxie, a tenacity like I have not seen in a receiver in a minute. And it's real, it's raw, it's honest. And I love that for that of the New York Giants, John. And when we saw that with LSU, when he wasn't getting the ball, he would get frustrated, but it was contained frustration at that point in time. So I love what this dude is going to bring to the New York Giants. Now, New York Giants have a bit of an issue, right? They have no Saquon Barkley. They're revamping their identity on offense, right? They have Jalen Hyatt that they drafted last year from Tennessee, who was very, very mediocre, and that's me being super nice, right? And then you have Wan'Dale Robinson, who showed a lot of promise and then got hurt out of Kentucky. And then you have, right, Darius Slayton, who has been the old vet who for some reason still comes out and produces enough to help. None of those guys are bona fide number ones. Malik Nabers is. And so what's interesting, though, is Daniel Jones is going to be the guy throwing him the ball. Daniel Jones, if we saw the Daniel Jones 2 years ago, I think this could be super interesting. If we see what Daniel Jones did last year before he was out for season, it's going to be painful to see what happens with Malik Nabers. And then you layer on, okay, well, what happened with Derek Waller? We all know this. Derek Waller is gone. He's no longer in the NFL. He's officially retired. And so now that leaves open even more ability, more targets, more room for Malik Nabers. So what I'm getting at, John, is this dude is a freaking stud that could absolutely come in and make an immediate impact. Last year at LSU, man, he had 89 receptions, 1,569 yards receiving, 14 touchdowns. And by the way, there was another guy across from him that we'll talk about here in a second, Brian Thomas, who dominated the touchdown share. Okay, like it wasn't like this was completely the Malik Nabers show. He did this in tandem. So now you know that he can do this with other people as well. Huge plus, huge undervalued plus or underrated plus here. John, so then you start thinking about, okay, well, who can I compare Malik Nabers to, especially in this type of offense, right? Brian Daboll type of offense. Brandon Ayiuk with a little bit of Jamar Chase ceiling, right? That Jamar Chase might be a recency bias because of LSU, but him being able to take the top off is exactly a carbon copy of what Malik Nabers did. But the Brandon Ayiuk side of things is where that route running middle tier came into play. And that's where Malik Nabers thrived. Again, he wasn't the big red zone threat. He wasn't the guy that was strictly just doing quick out routes. This dude was dominating corner routes, flag routes, post routes, right? All the way to the deep and the medium tier. That has been what Brandon Ayiuk dominated this year doing. So, John, I really think between the mix of the ceiling of Jamar Chase, because of the situation that he's in, with the route running capability of Brandon Ayiuk, this cat is fucking ready to dominate this year, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Going 47th overall in ADP right now, the 26th receiver being taken. He's a round 4 guy, man. I mean, he's right around George Pickens, Zay Flowers, Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin. What's your thought process when you're on the board? Maybe you've got a receiver, you've got, 2 stud running backs. Maybe you've got 2 receivers, 2 running backs, and you're looking at, bringing on Malik Nabers. I mean, what's your thought process there? How are you looking at with roster construction?
Yeah, man, this is really interesting because you could be looking at this in a few different ways. Let's take one example. You drafted running back in your first 2 rounds. Maybe you went the JT Saquon Barkley route with the example that I gave in the previous with Marvin Harrison. Let's say round 3, you come back around and you're looking at Jalen Hurts. You're looking at a guy that's going to get you 350 plus fantasy points. By the way, the only other guy to do that is Josh Allen. Okay. And then CMC. So let's take it like with just Josh Allen for quarterback. Okay. So let's say you go Jalen Hurts in round 3. You now could legitimately be looking at Malik Nabers as your number 1. If that's the case, I'm okay with it. And people can criticize me and tell me I'm crazy. And the reason why I'm okay with it, John, is strictly because your strategy then is going to be receiver, 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 receiver. If you don't draft 4 to 5 receivers in a row, you're failing yourself. And so that's when this could work really well, because you're anchoring on those 2 badass running backs that you have and that quarterback that you know is going to dominate from a point share. Or to your other example number 2, what if you went receiver heavy and you went Devontae Adams, Marvin Harrison Jr., running back in the 3rd round, and you're sitting here looking at it? You could have Malik Nabers as your flex, or you could go another running back. Damn it, John, here I'm going to take Malik Nabers. The reason being is because of his upside, and I know that I can get one of these other running backs, let's say Nick Chubb, let's say Austin Eckler, let's say Jerome Ford, let's say some of these other cats, Gus Edwards, that you can get in the rounds subsequent following this. But now what you've done is you've solidified your receiver room already. You're good. Your 2 receivers are there. Your flex is there. Yeah, we'll filter in some back receivers towards the end. Maybe, grab whoever in rounds 8, 9, 10, etc. But here is where you laid the foundation. You already have your point killers and that of the receivers. You have a running back to solidify, right? That running back room to hold on, right? But here's where you can start getting creative with other running backs and tight ends or things along those lines and get a quarterback, right? Like what we talked about with Jaden Daniels, what we talked about with Caleb Williams, Jared Goff, Tua, Aaron Rodgers. And you don't even have to worry about getting a top-tier quarterback because you've solidified basically your starting team. So there's 2 different avenues that you could go when going Malik Nabers. John, I love them both. Just tread water when you're drafting and let that decide what happens in terms of your team today. But I love Malik Nabers, man.
Very similar situation as Marvin Harrison Jr.
Very.
I mean, really, you've got a capable quarterback that we know can support a good receiver.
Sure.
With 0 competition all around him. I mean, there's really nobody around. So at flex, if you get Malik Nabers as your flex, I love that. That makes me feel so good. And you're right. You can load up on the other positions, get deep with running back, then come back in the later rounds and get some more receiver depth. But I think that's a huge, very, very strong start.